So let's do the prayers first, and from today onwards we would follow the same sequence that we will continue with the rest of the text. So, and that's what that sequence is that we will do the Dasha Shantayaha, the 10 Shanti mantras, ending with Yo Brahmanam Vidadhati Purvam. Then we will switch over to the Dhyana Shlokas, which starts with Shruti Smriti Purananam and ends with Santata Manatosmi. So we'll do all of this in the very beginning. Then, as we will normally do, as I mentioned to you, we will chant the Dakshinamurti Ashtakam, Dakshinamurti Stotram rather, Dakshinamurti Stotram. So we'll do the first 5 of those out of the 10. Then we will study the Brahma Sutra. Okay, starting with today, the introduction, we will do that. Then at the end of that, we will chant the rest of the 5 Dakshinamurti Stotrams, then end with the Ashubhani Nirachashte, all the way up to Omatha, Omatha, Omatha. So that's how we will do. So if you just follow the sequence that I will follow today, and from then on, this is how we were going to do it. Om Shanno Mitra Sham Varunaha Shanno Bhavat Varyama Shanna Indro Brihaspatihi Shanno Vishnurukramaha Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Ritam Vadishyami Satyam Vadishyami Tanmamavatu Tadvaktaramavatu Avatu Mam Avatu Vaktaram. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti. Samendro Medhaya Aspranotu Amritasya Devadharano Bhuyasam Shariram Me Vicharshanam Jihva Me Madhumattama Karna Abhyam Bhuri Vishruvam Brahmanaf Koshosi Medhaya Pihitaha Shrutam Me Gopaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Aham Rikshasya Reriva Kirtif Prishtam Gireriva Urdhva Pavitro Vajiniva Swamritamasmi Dravinagum Savarchasam Sumedha Amritokshitaha Itirtishankor Vedanu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Apyayantu mama angani Vakpranas Chakshuh Shrotramatho Balamindriyani cha sarvani Sarvam Brahmopanishadam Maham Brahma Nirakuryam Mama Brahma Nirakarot Anirakaranamastu Anirakaranam Me Astu तदात्मनि निरतेय उपनिषत्सु धर्मास्ते मयि सन्तु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः वाङ् मे मनसि प्रतिष्ठिता मनो मे वाचि प्रतिष्ठितम् आविराविर्म एधि वेदस्य मानीस्थः श्रुतं मे मा प्रहासीः अनेनाधितेन अहोरात्रान् सन्दधामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारमवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः भद्रं नोऽपि वातय मनः ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येम अक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः यो ब्रह्माणं विदधाति पूर्वं यो वै वेदांश्च प्रहिणोति तस्मै तगुंहदेवमात्मबुद्धिप्रकाशं मुमुक्षुर्वै शरणमहं प्रपद्ये ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पाद शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः नारायणं पद्मभुवं वसिष्ठं शक्तिं च तत्पुत्रपराशरं च व्यासं शुकं गौडपदं महान्तं गोविन्दयोगीन्द्रमथास्य शिष्यं श्रीशङ्कराचार्यमथास्य पद्मपादं च हस्तामलकं च शिष्यं तं तोटकं वार्तिककारमन्यान् अस्मद्गुरून् सन्ततमानतोऽस्मि ॐ विश्वं दर्पणदृश्यमाननगरी तुल्यं निजान्तर्गतं पश्यन्नात्मनि मायया बहिर्गोद्भूतं यथा निद्रया यत्साक्षात् कुरुते प्रबोधसमये स्वात्मानमेवाद्वयं तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये बीजस्यान्तरिवाङ्कुरो जगदिदं प्राङ्निर्विकल्पं पुनः मायाकल्पितदेशकालकलना वैचित्र्यचित्रीकृतं मायावीव विजृम्भयत्यपि महायोगी वयस्वेच्छया तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये यस्यैव स्फुरणं सदात्मकम् असत्कल्पार्थकं भासते साक्षात् तत्त्वमसीति वेदवचसा यो बोधयत्याश्रितान् यत्साक्षात्करणात् भवेन्न पुनरावृत्तिर्भवाम्भोनिधौ तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये नानाच्छिद्रघटोदरस्थितमहादीपप्रभाभास्वरं ज्ञानं यस्य तु चक्षुरादिकरण Dvara bahispandate Janamiti tameva bhantam anubhatyetat samastam jagat Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Deham pranamapindriyanapi chalam Buddhim cha shunyam viduhu Stri balandha jadopamastuhamiti Bhranta bhrisham vadinaha Maya Shakti Vilasa Kalpita Mahavyamoha Samharine Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye. So today we start the Brahma Sutra itself, but an introduction to it, not the Brahma Sutra. That will still take some time. So one question that comes up is that you are familiar with and I think we went over this last week as well, the classification of the various texts, the Vedantic texts that we have in our literature. And so we had the Shruti, which is the direct utterings from the Vedas. Then we had the Smriti, and you know the distinction that the Shruti is apaurushaya. It is not man-made. It is there, always there. It's never absent. So the Vedas are part of the knowledge which is the very Swarupa of Ishvara. It's always there. And I think one of the Acharyas, I think might have been Swami Viditatmananda, that really clarified this very nicely for us. What he said was that if you look at the Akasha, the space, and how it contains so much information in the form of electromagnetic waves. So this is an interesting thing, just to digress for a minute. You know, I remember really not understanding how Akasha can be the very source of the creation. That's what Taittiriya Upanishad says. For example, you know, in the Brahmananda Valli, as you know, it says, well, I'll just start from the very beginning and just go up to the point where Akasha comes in. So it says, Brahma vida apnoti param tadesha bhyukta satyam jnanam anantam brahma yo veda nihitam guhayam parame vyoman so oshnute sarvan kamaan saha brahmana vipaschiteti tasmad va etasmad atmana akasha sambhutah akashat vayuh vayoh agnih agnehe apah adbhyah prithvi prithivya oshadhayah oshadhibhyo annam annat purushaha esha purusha annara samayah. I won't complete the whole mantra, but this is what it is. So there you saw Atmanaha Akasha Sambhutaha. So from the Atma, which is Brahman, which is the very content of Ishvara, Akasha Sambhutaha, the very first thing that is expressed. So not first thing which is manufactured, but the first thing which is manifest is Akasha. So I used to wonder when I started really studying Vedanta, how come Akasha, which seems to be nothingness, it is just not really even a dravya, it is not even a thing that we can see. How can that be the very beginning of the whole manifestation? It is an inert vastu. It used to bother me a lot. And then I think I started to understand that this Akasha, the space, is not what it seems to be. It has a number of very important forces, if you may, powerful forces that really are at the very beginning of the whole manifestation. And this understanding of mine, I'm just talking about my own personal understanding, took two forms. One of them was a clarification of the content of Akasha, and this is what I'm going to talk to you about in a minute about Swami Viditatmananda's assertion. The other one was a deeper understanding of what Einstein had said. So when I really started to read the book, I forget the name of the book, but it's a biography of Einstein. I read this about, I think maybe 15 years ago. And this was written by the same author that also wrote the biography for, who is the Apple guy? I forget his name. But anyway, I wasn't interested in that biography, but I found out that he had written a biography about Einstein. So I said, I want to study this. And I did. And therefore, it really enhanced my understanding of Akasha. So what Einstein had said was that Akasha is not an ordinary, and he also had to go through the same thinking and the same, not Vedantic thinking. His was much more scientific thinking. But he had to go through the same thinking about how can this be? So what he said was, how is it that the gravitational forces, where are the gravitational forces contained in? Where is this? So this is a very interesting question. If you look at gravitational forces, which is a very important force, which really governs the entire way which heavenly bodies are kept in motion at the same time. How is it, where is it contained? So you'll have to look at it. It is not contained in Prithvi, it is not contained in fire, it is not contained in Vayu, it is not contained in water, it's contained in Akasha. It's contained in the Akasha. And the curved space which allows the gravitational forces to manifest themselves, the curvature of the space is within the space itself. Anyway, I won't go into that in more detail, but let me switch over back to what Swami Viditatmananda has pointed out, which is, when I started this by saying about Shruti being a Paurusheya. So what he said was that, listen, at this moment, right here, there is an incredible amount of electromagnetic information. Where is that information? Where is that information? It's in the Akasha. Akasha contains it in unmanifested form. So even from a standpoint of our daily information, so right now there are TV information from Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 5, CBS. It's all in the Akasha. It's all there. You can't say that it's not there at all. And so when we have a non-understanding, then some important questions come up in our mind. Like Swami Maheswaranji had said, that suppose in the very beginning, when the battery operated transistor radios came up, this was a wonder. Because he says that I would sometimes, some person would take it to a village somewhere where people have not really grappled with this, the new scientific methods of, transistor radios and so on. So somebody takes a transistor radio and puts it in on the table, unconnected to anything, no electricity, no nothing. And he switches it on, it starts playing a music. Now you tell me, how are the villagers going to take this? They are going to say, oh my, what is this? How can this be coming? That's exactly what it is. So we really don't understand until we are really told the basis for doing this. So anyway, going back to the Akasha, in the whole space, there is all the Vedas always present. Always. In the background. Just like we have channel 2, channel 4, channel 5, there is Vidya for the Vedas all over in the entire universe at all the time. Timelessly. That's why they say the Vedas are perennial. There is no beginning, no end to it. This is the very Swarupa of Ishvara. Ishvara is not just a single person sitting somewhere, it is the whole universe. And part of that is not only the expression of the heavenly bodies and so on, but also the Vidya that goes along with it. And so this is the way it is. Then Swami Viditatmananda said that, listen, what happens is, just like we have today, supposing there is a iPod which is capable of tuning into the subtle aspects of the electromagnetic waves, it can then express the thoughts of the electromagnetic waves into something which is intelligible in terms of sound, pictures, and so on. So what it takes is a precise transformation of the faculty which allows the Vidya of the Akasha to be captured. This is what radios and televisions are all about. The table cannot capture the electromagnetic waves, but a very subtly designed, very subtle aspect of the creative aspect of making some instruments can capture it. Now we can close the loop on this very long explanation of Shruti. So Shruti is the Vedas, and it can be captured by very finely tuned minds of heavenly people. Not heavenly people, people. These are what is called rishis. And how did they get to be to that form? Why can't everybody capture it? Because they have a long history of sattvic thinking. Sattvic thinking means not thinking which is useless, but thinking which is very pure and useful. This is what our life is all about, really. When we are born, we cannot tell the difference between what is useful, what is useless. And so the child can just waste time doing nothing. And slowly what the child has to be taught is to tune out the useless and start to work on the useful. Useful meaning what is really good for you. Mangalam is what it is. It's interesting. If I can just go back and forth, I'm not just doing it. This is the beauty of having a class rather than reading a text, that you can go to some directions and certain ideas that are relative, but they cannot be presented in a sequential manner. So what I'm saying is that if you look at this this verse that we haven't chanted today, so Ashubhani nirachaste tanoti shubhasantatim. So I was going to talk about it later, but in the relevance of what I'm doing now, I'll do that now. Smriti matrena yat pumsam brahma tat mangalam param. That is the word I wanted to just comment on. Smriti matrena tat mangalam karam. Smriti matrena means that one which is by the pure, just by thinking about it, bringing it to your mind, it becomes mangalam. It becomes something which is very useful. That's how I got the word mangalam. That's how I digressed into this. But not digress, it's a relative thing. So now we can go back to, it's an interesting thing, the difference between Shruti and Smriti. So the Shruti is the manifestation of this subtle vidya which is in the Akasha all the time, captured by the fine minds of the rishis. So this is a direct understanding of what is being said by Ishvara. And they are the ones who have qualified themselves through many lives of sattvic thinking to really focus on the very subtle aspects of life which is useful to them in terms of having complete freedom. So this is called Shruti. Now the Smriti, starting with all of the recollections of the Shruti, this is what Smriti means. Smriti means memory. So if you look at it, the word memory means something which was collected before is now recollected. That's what Smriti means. That's what memory means, isn't it? So the memory means that whatever was taught first but has not yet become useful should be remembered for you to become useful. This is what it is. He says, Smriti matrena yat pumsam brahma tat mangalam param. It says just by merely thinking about it. Thinking about what? Thinking about what you have learned before. You see, this is the important thing to see. If you don't know the facts about the whole creation, that Brahman is the very content, you are the very content, and everything that is projected that you see around you is merely a manifestation of that content. It's like the ornaments of a gold. That's what it is. But the reality of that is you yourself. So this has to be taught by Shruti. Somebody has to tell you this. Until now we had no idea. This is why it says that that this knowledge is hidden behind your own buddhi. The word guha is used. Guha means a complete cave-like thing where there is no light whatsoever. This is exactly our situation is, that I am the very complete vastu that I am seeking, but I don't know it. And so this is complete guha. And so that has to be broken through some light. Somebody has to tell you, hey, you are knocking around the world trying to gain some small satisfaction from things by eating and by singing and by doing this. Did you know you are the very source of it? Did you ever? And she said, no, I never knew that. And in fact, even when it is told, I still don't say, what? How can I be the very source of Ananda? That's not possible. Shruti smiles and says, yes. Just wake up to it. It is very much like a child that is having a nightmare and saying, no, 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 and the tiger is eating me. And then so the mom says, please wake up. You are just babbling about nothing. This is just a dream. Wake up from it. And the child, the difference between the dream and this is that in the dream just a touch of the body wakes you up. But in the, like this morning also, for example, now my habit is I usually wake up by myself. In fact, sometimes I want to go to sleep more, but I usually wake up between 4:30 and 5 o'clock. That's been a habit. For some reason, last night I was saying, should I put an alarm? I said, no, I always wake up at 4:30 anyway, it doesn't matter, so I'll be ready for this class. Lo and behold, I did put the alarm in. Some dreaming I was doing when the alarm woke up. And just the minute the alarm rang, I woke up. And so, really speaking, Smriti Matrena means you should have known before. I'm telling you all this. This is very relevant to what Brahma Sutra is. So I have a method in mind when I'm spending so much time on doing this. So, Smriti Matrena means that, and so really what happens is that typically, for those of us that have been studying Vedanta for a long time, because Swami Paramarthananda has said that, and he is very insistent on that. Every time you listen to his talks, he's one of the greatest masters of Vedanta, one of the greatest disciples of Swami Dayanandji. He also was a disciple of Swami Chinmayanandji, very much like me, both of them. But what a wonderful person. He says that Shravanam doesn't mean just attending a few classes. That doesn't mean. You have to stay with it for a long period of time, studying different aspects of it. Then comes Shravanam. Then you can say, yes, Shravanam is now nearly complete. It is never complete, but it is close enough to be useful. So if you do that, and I would say, for me personally, I can boast about that I have now spent the majority of my life, and I'm getting very old, in Shravanam. So I think I have a good idea of what all the various Upanishads are saying, etc., etc. Yet, and this is the point I'm making, yet I am beset by daily problems of life, but they are receding. And what happens is that if I encounter some kind of a problem means that my mind rebels against it and so on. Oops, wow, why did this happen? So on. Smriti matrena yat pumsam. I just recall myself, what am I doing? Why am I just reacting on something so small? Have I not understood? And that changes things completely. Amazing. Just a Smriti Matre. But my Smriti is partially effective only because I have done a lot of Shravanam. Otherwise, Smriti means that to recollect what? You cannot recollect anything. So this is really the difference between Smriti and Shruti. Okay? And so, Akasha contains the Shruti, and you can be the radio that captures the Shruti, and then anytime there is a issue, you can remember it. If you do forget, the difference between me is that I may not remember it all the time, whereas somebody like Ramana Maharshi, once he got the truth, he says that's it. There's no question of forgetting it. That's how the differences are between Uttama Adhikari and Madhyama Adhikari. Anyway, so having said that, now I pose a question to you about the Brahma Sutra. So it's in some way, this is the beginning of the introduction to Brahma Sutra right now. The question is, where will you put Brahma Sutra in the classification of Shruti, Smriti, Purana, etc., etc.? Is it a Shruti or is it a Smriti? It's certainly not a Purana, because the Purana is in the form of stories. This is not a story. This is like the machine language, which is very strict and not enjoyable as a music, like a story would be or a music would be. So it's certainly not a Purana. Now the question is it a Smriti or a Shruti? Or it's not Itihasa also. This is an important thing to see. So here, our acharyas have pointed out that the Brahma Sutra is given the same status as the Shruti. It is the Shruti. And how is it the Shruti? Why can't you just say it? Can I just accept it, your word? Yes, I have Shraddha. If my acharyas say it is Shruti, then I accept it. But my question is how? Why? Why should I accept it? Because it is not part of the Vedas? No. But first of all, the composer of Brahma Sutra is Vyasa himself. Vyasa is considered to be the avatara of Vishnu. As you know, it says, Keshavam Badarayanam. So it's this verse is an important verse. Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah. Okay, so just analyze this verse for a minute. So in the first line, two people are talked about. Shankaram and Keshavam, Badarayanam. Keshavam and Badarayanam are epithets of the same person. And that epithet goes to the fact that it represents the teaching of Vishnu. This is one person. The other one is Shankaram Shankara Acharyam. So the difference between, you know what an Acharya is? Acharya means one who not only says something, but whose life is a conduct of what he or she is saying. This is called an Acharya. And by one's own conduct, one's own lifestyle, you influence others. Swami Viditatmananda also, I just was not memorizing, but recalling some of the things he had said. In one of the satsangs, Swami Viditatmananda had said, very important thing, that and he was, I think might have been not even a satsang, I think might have, because I've spent a lot of time with him. He would come and stay with me here for the last 15 years, and so as you know, some of the students know. So he used to say that, if you look at what attracts a student to Vedanta, He says, I've analyzed this a lot. What attracts people is the person who is teaching. He says it is hard to distinguish between a person who is teaching as being the one that attracts or the teaching itself. Because the teaching itself, you see number of teachings. You see Buddhist texts and Jain texts and Vedantic texts and Christian texts and so on. You get confused by it. Which one should I do? And say you have some idea of what you want to do and you localize it. But this is why they say that you need a person to teach, a real person to teach. The reason is we have so many doubts about what's going on and who I am and what the teaching is all about, that until I see someone in flesh and blood who is a living, I wouldn't say an example, but who lives the life of the Vedantic teaching, unless I see that, I'm not very attracted. So Swamiji used to say that, this is what Swami Chinmananji and Swami Dayananji have always said. It's interesting, there's the difference between a Vedantic teacher and a non-Vedantic teacher. So if you think about, the Vedantic teacher means not someone who knows the subject perfectly, not just that person. Because supposing there is a physics teacher in University of California, Berkeley. I used to say Stanford all the time, but since I'm a graduate from the Berkeley, I've decided I'm going to promote my own school more. Stanford gets all that credit, but UC Berkeley. Supposing there's a physics professor from UC Berkeley who is absolutely the best there is. And in fact, I think some of my students know this. I was a student at Berkeley in 1964, in computer science. And then I had a chance to work under for one thesis with Dr. Donald Glaser, who is the inventor of bubble chamber. He won a Nobel Prize. And my professor, Dr. Wattenberg, told me, he says there is this project, it's going to lengthen your study by 6 months, but it is with Dr. Donald Glaser, and I can nominate one person for this project. Do you want to be on it? I said, absolutely, yes. It was a delightful 6 months that I had spent with Dr. Glaser and learned a lot. And anyway, that's just besides the point. Now forget about Donald Glaser, because what I'm going to say has nothing to do with him. Supposing there is a physics teacher who knows the subject inside out, but from a moral and ethical standpoint, he is terrible. The fellow is fooling around outside the marriage, whatever he can do. You can think about all the things. Cheats like hell, whatever it is. But when he comes to the classroom, he's perfect. He knows the subject matter and so on. So if you are a student of such a person, what would you say? Somebody might say, do you know he's a bad person outside this? And you say, it doesn't make any difference to me. I just want to study physics from him and leave him outside of that. Acharya, a Vedantic Acharya, cannot be like that. If the Acharya has an Achara means a conduct, which is separate from this, if you have ethicalness problems and morality problems and so on, cannot be a Vedantic teacher. So the teaching and the teacher have to be very consistent, is really what the word Acharya means. So going back to it, there are two people talked about in the first line, Shankaracharyam, Acharyam, then Keshavam Badarayanam. There are two people. Okay? Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punav Punaha. I give my salutations to these two people again and again. So the question is, what is the relationship between Sutra Kritam and Bhashya Kritam? So it's worth considering for a minute. So I said that Keshavam Badarayanam, who is the author of Brahma Sutra, Badarayanam, is the avatara of Vishnu. So Vishnu is really the author of, in this context, the author of the Shruti. Shankaram is the avatara of Shivam. And if I can just interject, one of the students just asked me recently in an email, where does Dakshinamurti fit into this? You know, we talked about Narayanam, Padmabhavam, Vasishtam, Shaktim, Chatat, all that. So Shankara, the Dakshinamurti is in fact Shivam in the form of a teacher, is called Dakshinamurti. So that's how that is. So now two people are talked about. One is Badarayanam. The other one is Shankaram. Okay, and so one is the teacher of the Shruti, and the other one is the teacher of the removal of doubts about the Shruti. So here, both Shiva, and Vishnu work in tandem. So why am I saying this? Because we should understand what our challenges are in our life as we tend to understand this very deep subject matter. What are the challenges? The challenges are, number one, we need to be very clear about what is being said here. Because something phenomenal is being talked about. Phenomenal means that it is not the normal stuff where how to make money and you do Ayurveda and you do this and you do that. These are such small things in my life. But the study of Vedanta is something which is unparalleled. It completely dismisses the reality of the whole world. Because the world is the one that I am confronted with every day. And I'm struggling with it, I'm fighting it, I'm trying to live up to it, and I'm involved in all aspects of it. Excuse me. But here it says you don't need to. It's like, I have a very convoluted dream with lots of stuff going on. And all of a sudden, by a blink, the whole thing is gone. This is what is being talked about. So my challenges are to really understand, is this really the truth as being talked about? And the Shruti says, yes. Yes, it is. But then you say, somebody says, I know what they say. In fact, I'm going to talk about what exactly Vyasa is, how is he going to structure the Brahma Sutra in just 1 minute. I'm just giving you the background to this. So the first challenge is to really understand the subject matter thoroughly. So this is what Brahma Sutra does. And the reason that Brahma Sutras are given the status of a Shruti is because it deals with the Shruti alone. It talks about, and we'll go into the more details about what it does, but just to give you a sense of it, it talks about all of the Shruti, important Shruti, that they're all saying the same thing. You cite examples and so on and so forth. So this is not a Smriti in that sense, because it is a direct explanation of the Shruti itself. So this is the Vyasa's part of it, which is the Brahma Sutra. Then comes Shankaracharya's Bhashyam. And as you know, the Bhashyam, the word Bhashyam, is only reserved for Shankaracharya ji's works for two things. One is Shruti and the other one is Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita, even though it is a Smriti, is also called the fifth Vedas. They also authored by Vyasacharya. So there the Bhashya, the word is used. But if Shankaracharya gives a commentary on some other kind of a thing, Purana and so on, that is not called Bhashya. And he doesn't do it anyway. You won't find it. So in Shankaracharya you have the Bhashyam for all the important 10 Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita. So now let us look at the importance of Bhashyam. We've already talked about Shruti. What is the importance of the Bhashya? So the Bhashya means, and this is the personification of the teaching of Shiva. So the Shruti is the personification of the teaching of Vishnu. But the Bhashya, because Shankaram is avatara of Shiva. And so what Shankara does is to clarify any doubts about the Shruti. The Shruti is so difficult and so hard to, I wouldn't even say difficult, it is hard to accept. Our own thinking blocks me or blocks us. How can I be the Ishvara? Not possible. I am just a lowly person. I cannot even deal with everyday problems. These kinds of doubts come in. It's like somebody in the dream and he says, no, I cannot be the waker. I'm involved in this very important plot and there is a court case going on against me and I'm fighting it and so on. And the mother is saying there is no court case, you are not fighting, you are in fact not the dreamer at all. No, but I know I'll maybe consider that later, but right now I think I'm very busy. I'm just telling you exactly this is what happens in our life. And so the Shruti says, wake up. Nothing of this is real. Just see your own reality. Just see the importance of it. Give it respect. Swami Maheshananji, in his commentary on the Panchadashi, in one of the Panchadashi, had brought up this word which is, I found to be a very important word. And I think I mentioned this in the other day's class, so I'll repeat it. It's called Adara. No, I'm sorry, it was not in the class, it was some other satsang. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The word is Adara and Anadara. So those who speak Hindi will recognize this word Adar and Anadar, because in Hindi the last O is elided. So instead of saying Adara in Sanskritam, it becomes Adar. So for those of us, Adar means respect. Anadar means disrespect. So the example given is that I would give is that supposing you have some visitors to your home. Supposing you have 4 or 5 people or more than that, let's say 10, 12 people that come for some kind of a social get-together. Now, you are giving them some normal respect that please come in, can I offer you a drink, this, that or the other. Now one of them happens to be a very important person. I'm just picking up this. Supposing there is the Vice Chancellor of Germany. Vice Chancellor, not an ordinary person. Vice Chancellor of Germany means supposing he is accompanying his relative and he came to your house. Now you don't even recognize him. You don't give him any respect. You don't do anything special for him until you are introduced to him. He says, by the way, I'd like you to meet the Vice Chancellor. You say, what? Oh my God, I cannot believe it. So this is called adara anadara. Adar means to give recognition and appropriate respect belonging to that recognition. And most of the problem is that we don't recognize the importance of people. This is what happened. This is my other challenge in life. So the first challenge is to completely understand the enormity of what is talked about in the Shruti. The other challenge is, even when I am told about the importance of the Atma, I ignore it. I don't have the capacity to understand the enormity of it. And so I disrespect it. That I am okay is just like an academic kind of a thing. I don't really see it as a reality for myself. And therefore I don't give it any respect. Swami Maheshananji had said, this is what we have to understand. And so sometimes, in our classes, people will say, yes, I have studied that I'm just the Sakshi, I'm just the Sakshi. And this, that you continue, and so there are a lot of spiritual groups that say, and in some manner even Ramana Maharshi also said, who am I? Just say, who am I? Who am I? I'm the Sakshi, etc., etc. And our Acharya just says, please, it is not that simple. You cannot just keep on chanting, I am the Sakshi, I am the witness, I am the witness, I am the witness. Because just by doing that, you do not comprehend the enormity of what the Atma is. If you by simply saying I am the Sakshi, if it is the beginning of a comprehension, then it's okay. But it better be just a small beginning of a huge comprehension. Like, for example, you have to now think about the fact that I was never born. My gosh, it will take you several months to have a contemplation on the fact, the importance of the fact, who is the person who can never be born. Swatasiddhatvam swayam bhagavati, swayam bhuhu, swayam jyoti, self-effulgent. And you begin to understand that this is what is called adara. Swami Maheshananji was so eloquent on this. He says, my goodness, you don't see the importance of Ishvara, the importance of Brahman. And then you keep on muttering, I am the Sakshi, I am the Sakshi. It doesn't do anything. So our second challenge, if I can bring it back. I'm sorry I'm spending so much time in giving you, but this is what I thought the class should be. It is not just some textual thing and so on, but an idea of what this is all about. So the second challenge is removing doubts and to understanding the enormity of this thing. That comes from Bhashya. That comes from opening the lock with the keys, because right now it looks like unlocked to me. Sutra Bhashya, we will see this Athato Brahma Jigyasa. What does it really mean? It means a lot. And how will be explained by the Bhashya. So in this sense, both Shiva and Vishnu, so in the case of here, Shankara and Keshava, both of them really work in tandem to help me with both types of my challenges. One is to understand the what Shruti is saying, and the other one is to make it real for me. Because what happens is, here's I would even just point out something else, and that is, remember when I had invited you to be a part of this course, if you recall, there were certain conditions that I had offered to you, suggested to you, that you please also study. You should have studied a lot of Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita, that you should know Sanskritam. It means that you have a background. So here's the issue. Here's what happens. Some of you I know have pleaded with me, and I've accepted you, that I don't have that much of a background, but can I please join in? So I said, fine. As long as you have a sattvic life, you're a vegetarian, or you have a sankalpa for becoming a vegetarian, then I accepted you. But here's the situation. What happens is that if you have not done this Shravanam properly, then Smriti Matrena Yat Pumsam will not be very effective to you, because it is a memorizing of, it's a recall of what is being said before. If you have not even done that first, how are you going to really understand what is being recalled? Well, I think that you will get something out of it, and perhaps as a course for the future, as a direction for the future. But I will end this by saying that the degree to which you understand both challenges, both from Shankara as well as from Badarayana, the degree to which you address both challenges will be the difference between just a pure academic way of looking at it, or to say, my God, that is true. I can see this. There's a difference. There's a difference. If your preparation is not very, not thorough, if your background is not thorough, it would stay as academic. You will say, oh, this is very interesting. Wow, I've got to remember this. This is wonderful. You write it down somewhere, some insights and so on. Purely academic. It is not as though the academic is not important. I think Swami Maheshananji in his writings has given one example which has been phenomenally important for me personally. He says the learning of Vedanta is like the learning of a new language. So just consider the process of learning a new language. How will you go about looking at it? So supposing you are being introduced to Sanskrit. How does it happen? So at this point you are just starting from, of course the learning of a language is a very interesting thing, because sometimes the kids, when they learn a language from their parents, they don't go through Sanskrit and words and so on and so forth. They just start mimicking the sounds that they hear and making some sense of it, repeating it, and they get a good sense of it. doesn't mean that the language is not well known by them. Doesn't mean that it is well known by them. But they have a sense of it. But if you look at learning a language, first of all, it is very academic. So you look at the alphabet, you look at the combination of alphabets, remember the sounds associated with it, pronunciations associated with it. It's not connected together yet. But then there comes a point where, just like I am talking, the words become effortless. You know the language so well. You can express yourself. Your whole life is nothing but, in fact, language is an important thing because we think in terms of words and sentences and ideas. And so the learning of Vedanta is exactly like this. At first it looks very academic. Then the language seeps into you. And your own way of thinking and doing and so on and so forth all becomes as though it is the language of Vedanta. So I would summarize by saying that the yardstick with which you should measure your preparation and your eligibility for this course is to what degree does it sound academic, and to what degree does it sound insights that you can deal with, you can see right away, as will happen in many cases as we will go forward. So that's kind of like how the Brahma Sutra is. So now so this is a interesting introduction by Swami Paramarthananda, whose treatment of Brahma Sutra I'm following very closely. So he says that Vyasacharya takes up 3 tasks in this sutra. And the makeup of the sutra I will discuss next time. So in the remaining time, I will just give you some basic introduction to what he's trying to do in terms of what we have already discussed. So at least we can finish doing that in the next 5 or 7 minutes. So Vyasacharya, in composing the Brahma Sutra, has 3 tasks in mind. What are they? The first task is to collect all the important, relevant Shruti Vakyas at one place. Because the Vedas is vast. Vast. In fact, Badarayana himself has composed all the 4 Vedas. He's not an ordinary, he's not a human being, he's God incarnate. And so to collect all the Vedas into the 4 Vedas is an enormous task. And so in this sutra, Brahma Sutra, he has again now distilled the important. How can you say important? Isn't everything in the Vedas important? Well, because, yes, it is true, everything in the Vedas is important. But in terms of addressing the challenges faced by a human being, you kind of summarize and distill the ideas that are very relevant to our thinking. So that is how he takes up. So this is why it is called the Shruti itself. Brahma Sutra is nothing but Shruti itself. Why? Because the first task that he does is to take up the key statements of the Upanishads and analyzes the sayings of the Upanishad, and by proper analysis brings out the Vedantic teaching. I'm just looking at the words that are used by Swami Paramarthananda. And so as part of that, it naturally involves interpretation. Because people can say, I think it means this, I think it means that. And so Badarayana's task is to arrive at the right interface by refusing the wrong interpretation. So in this context, the words of Swami Dayananji resonates in my mind at this moment. He says, look upon the Brahma Sutra as the sayings of a spiritual Supreme Court. Ishvara's Supreme Court. So there are two things involved in saying Ishvara Supreme Court or spiritual Supreme Court. One is the Supreme Court itself. Because the Supreme Court is meant to have the finest legal minds that can distill the essence of the two types of arguments or multiple arguments that are given to you, and to be able to authoritatively say, this one is wrong, this is correct. This is what a Supreme Court does, in theory. There again comes the spiritual part. In theory, our Supreme Courts are all-knowing, but they are not. As you know very well, that Supreme Court is either too conservative, too liberal, somewhere in between, unpredictable. Human beings can make mistakes. So the local Supreme Court is not perfect, even though their methodology is good. The spiritual Supreme Court doesn't have that defect. So Badarayana is the Vedantic. Those are the words that Swami Dayananji had said. He is the Supreme Court, and as we will see, we will discuss it in the Sutra Bhashya, in the sutras themselves, how he presents both sides of it. And so it's very interesting that he puts as much authenticity into the wrong arguments as he does to the right arguments. So if you look at the lawyers that speak in the Supreme Court, they are not flunkies. They are very intelligent people that argue for their viewpoint very well. You know, what is it? There was reminds me, I think Swami Dayananji had given this joke, I don't remember. So this husband and wife had gone for a settlement to the court, and the wife said, "Sir, my husband is a terrible guy, he has done this to me," and so on and so forth, and it's very clear. See, don't you see the evidence? He's done this, he's done that. So the judge says, "You are right." Then the husband comes up and he says, "Sir, you don't know what she has done to me. She has done this to me and this to me and this to me." So the judge says, "You are right." So one of the lawyers said, "Sir, both of them cannot be right." So the judge says, "You are right." I remember that. It's something like that. So both the arguments of the wrong argument and the right argument are passionately fought, and yet in the end. And I think I'm not just giving you a theoretical thing, because I think some of you may remember from my previous classes, I attended a class with Swami Dayananji on Antaryamitvam. Who is an Antaryami? So the one which says the human being is the Antaryami. He and she is the one who knows what my life is all about, what is good for me, what is not good for me, and he follows the conscience. And so the Supreme Court in Brahma Sutra will say, "You are right. That sounds very credible. Then the other person comes in, he says, no, sir, this is Ishvara that is the Antaryami. It has nothing to do with the words are put in, the thoughts are put in by Ishvara. It is not by the human being. So he says, yeah, you're right. So then he says, sir, both cannot be right. You tell me what is right. So he then thinks over it, again pronounces it. In this particular case, Ishvara is the Antaryami. I mean, this is how the Brahma Sutra proceeds. So the first one, the 3 tasks is, it summarizes and highlights the key statements of the Upanishad. Okay. Then the second and the third are also equally important, and I think we're running out of time. So we will not do so. Let us quickly chant, and in fact we need to have a couple of minutes for doing that. So let's chant the last 5 the Dakshinamurti Stotrams, and then the few ones, and then we are pretty much done. Rahu grasta divankarendu sadrisho maya samachadinat sanmatra karanopasamharnato yo bhut sushuptaf puman pragasvapsamiti prabodha samaye yapratyabhigyayate tasmai shri gurumurtaye namaidam shri dakshinamurtaye बाल्यादिषु अपि जाग्रदादिषु तथा सर्वास्वस्थास्वपि व्यावृत्तास्वनुवर्तमानमहम् इत्यन्तस्फुरन्तं सदा स्वात्मानं प्रकटीकरोति भजतां यो मुद्रया भद्रया तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये विश्वं पश्यति कार्यकारणतया स्वस्वामी सम्बन्धतः शिष्याचार्यतया तथैव पुत्रात्यात्मना भेदतः स्वप्ने जागृति वा य एष पुरुषो माया परिभ्रामितः तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये भूरांस्य नलो नीलोऽम्बर्महर्नार्थो हिमांशुः पुमान् इत्याभाति चराचरात्मकमिदं यस्यैव मूर्त्यष्टकं नान्यत् किञ्चन विद्यते विमृशतां यस्मात् परस्मात् विभोः तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये सर्वात्मत्वमिति स्फुटीकृतमिदं यस्मादमुष्मिंस्तवे तेनास्य श्रवणात् तदर्थमननात् ध्यानात् च संकीर्तनात् सर्वात्मत्वमहाविभूतिसहितं स्यादीश्वरत्वं स्वतः सिद्ध्येतत् पुनरष्टधा परिणतं चैश्वर्यमव्याहतम् ॐ अशुभानि निराचष्टे तनोति शुभसन्ततिं स्मृतिमात्रेण यत्पुंसां ब्रह्म तन्मङ्गलं परम् अतिकल्याणरूपत्वात् नित्यकल्याणसंश्रयात् स्मर्तॄणां वरदत्वात् च ब्रह्म तन्मङ्गलं विदुः ओंकारश्चाथ शब्दश्च द्वावेतौ ब्रह्मणः पुरा कंठं भित्त्वा विनिर्यातौ तस्मान्माङ्गलिकौ उभौ ॐ अथ Okay. Let me see. second, I cannot see somehow my whole screen is taken up by the picture. Cannot see the chat window. Ah, got it. Thank you. All right, let's see who's here, and if you have any questions. Nagaraj Rao, Shanti Kumar, Darshana, Suvarna, Gajananam, Rachel Benevento. Welcome, Rachel. Subha Hari, Punita, Arvind, Lakshmi, Jaya Chaudhary, Surendra Bhargava, Sushma Bhatia, Nitin Mohan, Ashish Asthana, Kalpana Dave, Ram Mandalam, Vishwanath Kara, Shrida, Henry Haikinen, Surendra again, Sudha Tomar, Rani Goel, Srinivas, Girish Sharma. Welcome, Girish. This is your first class. Shobhana Dalal, Naksha Dalal, Satish Jalota, Vikram Sadagopan, Neeta Muni, Suresh Belani, Chaula Joshi, Zarina, Saishav, Keshav Chopra, Subroto, Vinod Desai, Raj Velpuri, Sulochna Lulla, Sanjeev Sabarwal, Ila Joshi, Zarina. Yes, you're right, Walter Isaacson. Thank you, Zarina, the author of the Einstein biography. Jyoti Shekhar, Virendra Singh, Varun Vij. See if there's anybody else. Kirsten, Chris Narayan. Chris Narayan, yes, I would say that the Bhagavad Gita is regarded as even though from a technical standpoint it is a Smriti, but so I would say the following distinction. Okay, the Shruti, which is revealed by Vyasa, is perennial, right? Perennial means that even in the next 100 million years or whatever, it will always be there. But Bhagavad Gita, also authored by Badarayana, by Vyasa, is topical to a time period. And so it becomes much more specific to, so for example, Bhagavad Gita is very useful to the daily lives of ourselves who are fighting a kind of a war. You know, what is good, what is bad, what is good in it's happening right here in Washington, for example. So all of that is a war within our lives, which is specific to this particular case. So that's how it would be called Shruti versus Smriti. Okay? But in terms of the importance of Bhagavad Gita, in terms of the subject matter and authenticity of it, it is as good as the Vedas. So it can be called Shruti also. Oftentimes it is called the fifth Veda of Bhagavad Gita is called the fifth Veda. Yes, Kalpana, it is Vyasa is the another name of Badarayana. Yes. There is a new name that I don't know, Vikas Luhak. Even Advaita Vedanta superimposes a Brahman on man. What is the right way of seeing that if free from all methodology? This is not a proper way of saying that Brahman is superimposed upon the man. It means that you have not completely understood the Shruti. So I would deal with you separately. You kindly, first of all, identify yourself as a student of this course, send me an email and I will try to respond to you separately. Gargi Drikshit, also a new student. Welcome, Gargi. You called, I think it's your Gargi is not your real name, that is just, anyway, I'm not sure. You called Brahman Vastu today. Swami Dayanand in his lectures does as well. My daily use of the term Vastu, I have always thought of it as an object, so the word of Vastu used to surprise me. Can you explain a bit about the term Vastu? The meaning of the words is up to us. So, Vastu here means Satyam. So, it is not a Vastu as a thing, but a Vastu as the reality. And I think you are Hindi speaking, so I can address you, Dikshitji, which is that, for example, sometimes we say, Vastav ki baat to ye hai. Vastav means in reality. So the Vastav comes from the word Vastu. The Vastu means the reality itself, the very truth. And so the superimposition of the meaning of the word Vastu as a thing is man-made. But from a Shruti standpoint, the Vastu means not a object, but the very reality of the Atma. That's how it is. Okay, thank you. Your name is Surjit and your wife's name is Gargi. Okay, Surjit, wonderful. I need to run. Good. Thanks for all of you tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully next week. Om.